Hi, so as Denise said, we will be talking about our TAR project that was focused on increasing confidence in pre-faculty instructors through a Teaching Scholar Bootcamp. And since there are two of us, I'm Kelly, I'm in biophysics and biochemistry.
And I'm Larry, I'm in ecology and evolutionary biology.
Next slide.
So the questions that we were focused on were basically, can we increase graduate and postdoctoral teaching assistant self-confidence with a single 3-hour workshop? So our goals were to do a one-off workshop that was relatively low intensity and see what those changes could be. And then we were doing a follow-up longitudinal study to see what changes in classroom teaching we could observe from graduate students and postdocs. Just to describe a little bit more about our intervention, it was a 3-hour teaching boot camp on a Saturday. It was an opt-in, so these TFs were teaching fellows, were teaching intro bio. Again, this is the 6-week intro biology module on cellular and molecular physiology. So they all came out on a Saturday for 3 hours of teaching development. And the goal of our outcomes were just that the graduate students would feel confident incorporating active learning and inclusive strategies in their classroom. Most of the time, PhD students come to Yale with no previous teaching background, so we just wanted to make them feel more confident and more secure on that first day. Next slide.
So our project design you can see here on this timeline, as Larry mentioned, it's a six-week teaching module. So we started off with one of our main methods was using surveys. So we gave a survey before our boot camp. The interventions are shown in green, so then we had our boot camp and a post-boot camp survey. We observed their GTAs or PTAs 3 times in week 1, week 4, and week 5. They're highlighted in the yellow boxes. And then had the students complete a post-module survey after they finished teaching, and then as well did individual debriefing and exit interviews. Next slide.
So this is a schedule of what we actually did for our boot camp. We started with an icebreaker, which is always, a good thing to start with. Then we talked a little bit about the evidence-based theory behind why active learning and inclusivity and diversity increase student outcomes. We used the text, excerpts from the text, How We Learn, followed by 2 separate micro-teaching modules, if you will, where each teaching fellow at the boot camp got to micro-teach a active learning technique, and then in the second micro-teaching event, they would actually teach a scientific concept that they would be teaching in the intro bio class. We targeted micro-teaching as our approach because we hypothesized that the biggest barrier to doing active learning in the classroom or addressing an inclusivity and diversity concern is actually being too scared to try it. So we looked at this as a way to actually get their hands wet so they could actually feel what it was like to do that in front of other people. And then we had feedback around from both Kelly and I and also from the other participants in the room. Next slide.
So as I mentioned, our primary results that we're going to talk about today are through a survey testing self-confidence and self-efficacy in the classroom. So the questions are numbered here 1 to 6, and you can see we have the black bar shows the pre-module survey results. The gray bar shows the post-boot camp, so right after our workshop, and the light gray is then at the end of the semester. I've highlighted, so questions 3, 4, 5, and 6 were most, showed significant increases in self-confidence. And these were kind of more technical strategies in the classroom, which extent can you craft good questions, can you use a variety of assessment strategies, can you provide an alternate explanation, etc. Interestingly, I've highlighted questions 4 and 6, which showed significant increases from after the boot camp. So before the boot camp and after the boot camp, the teaching fellows found that they could use a variety of assessment strategies more effectively after the boot camp, as well as implement alternative strategies in the course, which matches kind of our target with the things we focused on in our boot camp itself. Next slide.
So the conclusions from this part of the study were that all of the GTAs and PTAs involved showed increased confidence in incorporating a variety of strategies into their classroom after the boot camp. There was also a general increase in confidence in the classroom after the entire 6-week module. In our classroom observations, which we did so many of, we actually showed decreased implementation of active learning and inclusivity inclusive teaching strategies, but we attribute this to both TS needing to maybe implement active learning less as they become more attuned to their students' needs. But we've maintained that the bootcamp increased DTA and PTA confidence, but we also see that decline after halfway through the semester. So we would encourage in future studies that repeated training is necessary for sustained changes in the classroom, so that in enacting that recall over time of these strategies and how to use them in the classroom would be beneficial to making sure those effects are long-lasting. Next slide.
So this is just a very brief acknowledgement slide. We first want to thank Dr. Valerie Horsley and Dr. Samantha Lim, who are the professor and course coordinator for the bio module we worked with. We also worked with another graduate teaching fellow, Julie Park, and Dr. Corey Kuchera in planning and kind of working together to make this TAR project happen. So with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. So once again, if you want to ask questions, you can raise your hand. You can type directly on the slide using the text box tool, or you can write into the chat room. And I have a question while we're waiting for other folks' questions. So you did classroom observations, you said, and I'm familiar with tools like observation tools like the COPUS instrument that helps you like measure how much active learning is going on. But I wondered how you assessed how much inclusive teaching was going on.
So one of the things we looked at was we used the COPUS protocol, but we also used a classroom map to track where the students were in the classroom as well. And using that, we then tracked who asked and who answered all of the questions. And then to look at kind of inclusivity, we looked at like percentage of who was talking based on perceived gender and perceived race. So we didn't include any of that data, but we found that, yeah, so there was not any major trends that we found with perceived race, which was interesting, but we did see some trends with gender. So the students asking questions tended to be of the majority gender of the classroom.
Cool. Yeah, the idea of using a map, that's a really nice idea. So here's this question: what active learning techniques did you teach before they did their micro-teaching?
We actually provided them with a list from Kimberly Tanner's article a few years back that kind of outlines I think there are 22 different types of active learning strategies, and we allowed them to read it and discuss it, and then they got to pick one that they wanted to try out. These involve things like fishbowl activities, think, pair, share, just a kind of a different blend of all types of different active learning activities.
Great. And so there's a nice comment here, but I also just want to ask you this question: do you have an idea about the optimum length of time between a boot camp and an actual teaching experience? That's a good question.
So we, ours was very, very close together. So we did the boot camp on the Saturday, and they led their first section that next week on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. So we intentionally tried that in attempting to make it as close as possible. We think that the students might need a second refresher, you know, halfway through the module, so like week 3 or so might have been a great time to have another event.
And also to address the drop-off question and maybe that optimum length question is that we start to see the drop-off after week 4. So in terms of when to have the boot camp and then when to have the reiteration, it seems to be between weeks like 4 and 5 out from the original boot camp. So somewhere in that optimum length between the boot camp and the first class and then the boot camp and the recall would be somewhere between a week and then 5 weeks later.